the Zion Institute, Mulberry Street, Manchester. Inside, Sir John Barbirolli and his Halley Orchestra, which he's directed for over 20 years. New York, Rome, London, they've all been after him, but he's immovable. This orchestra and this city is his life. The conductor and players, who know each other so well, are rehearsing the scherzo from Bruckner's Seventh Symphony, one of the many works which Barbirolli first introduced to audiences in this country.
Well, I won't measure exactly the bars, so you get a little time. That's fine. The last one will be a little softer. Before we go on. All right, now the scherzo itself, I'll give you plenty of time to get over. Now, remember, the great thing about this is you start it really softly. This one with tremendous sort of undercurrents of great nervousness, soft, but something ominous and tremendous about it. And the B wants to be much shorter. Yeah, it's all short. It's all got. They're all got dashes of them. It's like you get one bar right, you get a lot right. There's some long note somewhere. A place. It's the C that's too long. It's still like I do try. It's the bases I think it's doing. But they both come off after the C. If you keep it up, we lift it quick after the C. And get that, it's not nervous enough, it's not soft enough, there's not enough portent about it. And it's a little too slow. Behind. What? Too slow. And a tremendous sweep. It's not a comfortable scherzo. Can I shift you a bit? Come on. Full value. Otherwise you'll be behind all the time. Cut it little short. You've got the accents to make A itself. Don't vibrate heavily. Don't vibrate heavily, but with tremendous rhythm.
Barbirolli was in his 40s before he landed up in Manchester. Before that, he'd held very big appointments indeed, including being the conductor of the New York Philharmonic Orchestra. He joined them in Toscanini's day, and when Toscanini left, Barbirolli had taken over. But at 43, he left what was possibly the richest of all orchestras to take on one of the oldest and at that time poorest. Since then, the Italians, the Berlin Philharmonic, Covent Garden, the BBC, they've all made offers, but nothing will persuade him so far anyway to leave the Halle. He conducts, of course, all over the world, but from a firm base in Manchester. Thus, he spends 6 weeks twice a year in Houston, Texas, where he's the principal conductor of their symphony orchestra. Last year, he drove his Houston players through a tremendous tour and in one blow translated them into one of the leading orchestras of America. The Texans are vividly aware of what he's done for Houston and don't hesitate to say so.
I think he gets as much out of the symphony as any man possibly can. In fact, I'm quite sure there's no greater conductor in the world today than Sir John Barbirolli.
He's meant a great deal to Houston. We're very fortunate to have him. The orchestra has blossomed under his leadership.
They say much the same thing in Manchester.
Quite terrific sometimes. And I do remember once conducting the Great C Major by Schubert, which is a rather long symphony. He rambles, and he seemed to keep the coherence, keep the orchestra together, Normally, some conductors might let it sort of ramble on.
And a fantastic number of people travel quite a distance to come into the Halle for the concerts. And the Halle societies on the outskirts of Manchester, places like Marple and so on, they're quite strong and have a quite wide membership.
I can imagine if I was in the orchestra, I could be, I don't know how to describe it, taken away and worked up, into the feeling that Barbirolli seems to instill into them.
I think that he is, without any doubt at all, the greatest conductor in England today and one of a handful of the finest conductors in the world.
Well, Sir John is tops. He has done wonders for this orchestra, and being a little bit of a musician myself, I can appreciate his decisive beat, which gives the musicians everything that they want so they can read him exactly like it's supposed to be read.
Barbirolli himself is a Londoner, born and bred, born in 1899 to be exact. He spent his childhood in Drury Lane. His father and grandfather had come together to London from a village near Venice. They were both orchestral musicians. And when he was a little boy, John Barbirolli used to listen to them, they were both violinists, playing in the orchestras of the Alhambra, the Hippodrome, and the old Queen's Hotel. Manchester again. And here the normal routine is that Lady Barbirolli picks her husband up after the concert and they drive to their home, which is in Salford.
That's fine.
If his wife is away, he cooks for himself. She quite often is, being professionally Evelyn Rothwell, the oboe player. They've been married for 25 years.
They took it jolly well too, actually. Mind you, probably a lot of them really do like you, but the doctors mostly do.
I bet it is.
Sorry, now you say one or two.
One. Well, Sir Robert was there.
Alone, altogether, this is Barbirolli's only meal of the day. This regimen is absolute. One meal a day at midnight. Breakfast, lunch, dinner don't exist. He takes an occasional cup of coffee, perhaps even a sandwich, but only the one meal. Another curious thing. About 3 hours sleep is apparently all he needs. Anyway, that's all he takes. 4 hours sleep is a long night and exceptional. The remainder of the hours of darkness are taken up entirely with what seems from the outside, and probably is, a quite obsessive reading and marking of scores. What he says is that he must have any work, note by note, learnt and in his head before he brings it to an orchestra if he's to get them to play it as he has heard it. Early in his life, he was persuaded to conduct Elgar II at short notice. He knew it as a player, but not as a conductor. And he had to work, so he told us, without sleep for 48 hours flat to get it ready. He just made it. He started as a cellist. By the time he was 15, with a whole clutch of scholarships and prizes behind him, he was earning a living with his cello in theatres, cinemas, restaurants, music halls, and at the same time giving solo recitals and being described as a future Pablo Casals. He stopped playing the cello seriously when he began conducting at the age of 25. We filmed one of his rare appearances as a cellist in Westminster Abbey, where he was rehearsing a concert with the King's Lynn Quartet. We also filmed Barbirolli talking to Charles Reed, an old friend of 20 years standing and the music critic for The Spectator. They were on to when exactly Barbirolli had first started as a conductor.
For that we have to go to the army. And I joined the army in 1917 because I didn't want to be a conscript. I went a little earlier.
Underage?
And I was in the 1st Reserve Garrison Battalion of the Suffolks. I even remember my number, 52537. I don't know why. And we found after a bit there were quite a lot of good players there dotted about. So we decided to form, and our colonel was a very bad violinist but very enthusiastic. And he encouraged it, only said you mustn't expect any time off for this. We was called it the Voluntary Orchestra. It was fun. We were stationed at a mud island at the mouth of the Thames, the Isle of Grain, which was a terrible place, nothing to do. And so we had really quite a good orchestra. I remember the oboe player, he was an old Indian Army regular, a drunken old Irishman, but the most enchanting person you ever met. And he christened me Bob O'Reilly. When I got my degree in Dublin, the Chancellor said, you don't know that he's really an Irishman. His name is Bob O'Reilly. He said, not Barbirolli. And so we had this also. We had a lot of fun.
You'd taken your cello to the army?
We found we could use it to pass the time. And it really quite, we used to play overtures, a bit of symphonies, a good program. And we were conducted by an old army bandmaster who was on there, who was one of our officers. One day, and we used to rehearse during the week and give a concert in the NAFI, in the canteen, on Saturday night. On Saturday morning, just before the afternoon rehearsal, he was taken ill. And I talked to these boys, these pals of mine, about this, wanted to be a conductor. So they said, what about John, to conduct tonight? And when the summons came, I was on fatigue duty in the officers' mess scrubbing the floor. So I wasn't summoned from the pit, I was on my knees. And so it came about, and that night I conducted the concert. And it will appear later, I have a strong belief that conductors are born and not made. And I conducted that night technically as I do today. I never had a stick in my hand. And the first piece I conducted was that charming suite of Coleridge Taylor, the Petite Suite de Concert. And so that actually my first experience of conducting, but when he heard I conducted and had been a great success, he recovered remarkably quickly from his illness, this officer of ours.
You said, Sir John, that conductors are born, not made. Does it follow from that it's impossible to teach conducting?
I say yes, but then I'm talking about, you know, the really great conductor. You see, you've got it, this is a long subject which I can't go into now, but you've got two sides of conducting. You have the physical act of conducting, which is the one that has the effect on the orchestra, and then, of course, there is the musical side. What you can't teach is the power to make an orchestra sound as you want it to sound and reflect all your thoughts upon the music.
So, there are people who think that if they go to John Barbirolli is capable of turning them into copies of himself. Are you often approached by people who think that?
Yes, time and time again. And from all over the world. Now, but I won't do it because it's dishonest. Because, see, they don't want to learn score reading from me or balance. They think I can teach them to do the things that Furtwängler could do, Tommy Beecham, Richter, others. And that is absolutely... You see, when I boasted I conduct the same when I started as I did now, I'm talking about now technically. I'm not really boasting because there's nothing to do with me. The good Lord, or whoever the thing is, put it into my arms. You see, once I've learnt the music mentally, the translation into physical terms for the orchestra is absolutely unconscious. And then you have to make entirely different gestures for different players. You get very sensitive people that I only look at those. Otherwise, you have some of you pull it out of, and some of you just let it emerge.
Students at the Royal Manchester College of Music, an annual event. They're working on the last movement of Tchaikovsky's Fourth Symphony.
Don't hurry it and keep always try all hit it together. It's not at all bad. Once again. 3, 4. That's it. That's it. Wait, now. Please, from the end, count 1, 2, 3, 4. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. Bum, 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 bum. Right, last 17. Always start together. The strings make an awful lot of because the brass stopped playing there. See, they all stop, so we must supply the gap.
The Halle, perhaps more than other orchestras, being far from rich and having to make almost all the money needed to run it, has members being tempted away by bigger offers time and time again. Barbirolli is convinced that the north of England can keep up with any rate of replacement needed, particularly in the brass sections, and particularly from places like the Royal Manchester College of Music. The orchestra itself is probably worked harder than any other orchestra in this country. The institute where they rehearse was once the centre of the Pleasant Sunday Afternoon Society. And now, amongst other things, it's the home of the Citizens' Advice Bureau and of the overflow classes from Mulberry Street Primary School. Berlioz, Hungarian March. Barbirolli is far from being simply the musical director and principal conductor. Since he took it over, he's constantly fought for better conditions for the Halle and often threatened to leave or to change his conditions of work. He used his own position as a lever, in fact, to raise the salaries of the members of his orchestra. He enters into the minutiae of organization and is in constant concentration of the Halle Concert Society, particularly with Clive Smart, the general manager.
I reckon if we allow a sort of couple of hours to clear the airport, you never know what's going to happen. We'd better play it reasonably safe. Say, if we get that at 1:30, we should be away by 3, and it's about an hour from Geneva to Lausanne. You won't need much rehearsal because you'll have completely rehearsed
we
the
just
program.
want to hear the sound.
Before you go. So I suggest 6 till 7 and the concert's about 8:30.
When do they have their meal?
Well, I would suggest tea. Have some light tea about 4:35 to 5:30.
Mind you, if they had tea with an egg or a sandwich.
A substantial tea.
But so many of them are not used to eating it late, you know. Maybe we could put that to the orchestra themselves.
Yes.
Of their 235 engagements last year, the Halle gave only about 100 in Manchester itself. The rest were all over the place. They travel around a lot to pay their way. To Leeds, Sheffield, Bolton, to Truro, Exeter Plymouth to Glasgow and so on. The average age of the players is 37 and a half, and the average salary something under £25 a week. There are 88 players altogether.
Very much to hand, too. Splendid. And then, do we possess Shostakovich 1?
No, we have to hire that.
We have to hire that from
Yes.
these swindling
From-
publishers.
Yes, that's right, yeah.
Who won't sell you anything these days.
The Halle Library is also in the Zion Institute. Here there are literally hundreds of scores, all personally marked and bowed by Sir John. And these serve both the orchestra and the conductor, whatever they may be playing anywhere in the world. The librarian is Pat Ryan, who still occasionally plays in the orchestra himself.
Got the Esultate Jubilate of Mozart in the library. It's for orchestra and soprano.
Ah.
Can you look up the old
can you look
catalogue,
up
Jimmy?
that,
We hired it last time, I think.
We hired it last time, yes.
Did you do the whole work?
Yes.
Could they
Yes.
did it?
The whole motor.
Who
Yes,
did
we
it?
did.
Macaris.
Charles Macaris, that's right, yes.
But we have to hire that.
We hired it from, yes.
But I shall want masters of that.
Yes, that's right.
Barbirolli talked very readily about his link with the city of Manchester.
You love the city,
I've grown to love it.
the city and the community.
You see, nobody, by the wildest stretch of imagination, can call this a very beautiful city. But you have the strange thing that always I find that the nerve center of the highest activity generally takes place in rather drab cities. For instance, the nerve center of music in Italy is in Milan. See, not in Venice, Florence. Sometimes places of extreme beauty have a little of a decadence and debility about them, like the great conductors, like Toscanini was never in Rome, Milan. Nikisch wasn't in Berlin, but excuse me, in Leipzig. And the fascination of the North becomes, and you feel if you achieve anything here, that you really achieved it. I don't know if I've told you this before. It's soon after I'd arrived. I was conducting in Hanley. And somebody asked for an autograph during the interval, and I said, no, would I mind coming at the end of the concert? And it turned out that it was a young soldier boy who had to get back to his unit. He couldn't stay till the end, so I said, of course, bring him in. So he came, and he took my hand and shook it in a grip of iron, and he says, wonderful concert, sir, so far. And I never forgot that. He wasn't going to, the first half had been all right, but he wasn't going to commit himself. And I'm glad I heard that early in my career in the North. I thought, do you think to care? Damn, I came from New York or anywhere else. I was now in Manchester. And that was that. And the respect and that I've earned from these people is something worth acquiring. I remember when I had my last operation, the orchestras to tell me if they got in a bus with a fiddle or anything that looked like an instrument, the conductor, probably least interested in music, would say, "How's the governor?" So I become a part of the city, in a way. And then I say, cities like this, by their mere drabness, the people have to find the concept. You can concentrate in a city like this, I think. And then it's a city of very great achievement in other spheres. But if you take the, as I say, it might be a mixed blessing. The atom was first split here, Professor Rutherford. Some of the greatest doctors have come from here. The last two presidents of the Royal College of Physicians, the Royal College of Surgeons, are both Manchester men, professors in Manchester. School of Architecture, Law. It's a city with a splendid tradition. And people don't like coming to Manchester for presidents of colleges and conductors of important orchestras, but they've had to. You see, but then again, as I say, it's this loyalty and the solidity, and another thing I'm very proud of is being given the freedom of the city. It's not a thing that they throw about. If you looked at the list, it has Clemenceau, Haig, President Wilson, Churchill, Montgomery, and I'm the first member of any professor of the arts to have been given the freedom of the city, which is a very high honor indeed.
How did you come to take over the Halley Orchestra?
Well, that's a story that's been told a few times in the history of the Halley. But it really started, you know, I was in America when the war broke out. And I couldn't get home, of course. And in 1942, I was really desperate. My family was here, my mother. Then out of the blue came this cable from the Halley. Said, would I be interested in the reconstruction of the Halley Orchestra? Now, without waiting for many details, I said to Evelyn, I said, this is it. We're going home. And then I had very interesting correspondence, which had been published in Michael Kennedy's book on the Halley. And I came home expecting to find an orchestra of at least 70 players. But I did. When I got home, a lot of the people they thought would have left the BBC because they'd been taken over by the North. It's a long story, I won't bore you with now. I found I had 26 players left, and in a space of about 5 weeks I was supposed to start the season with a full symphony orchestra. Anybody who knows the difficulties under which I had to see, the whole country was mobilized, male and female, and we immediately announced auditions which lasted 6-7 hours a day, and I had to look for people which I'd say were partially maimed. That means that they couldn't get into the services, but for instance, a chap with flat feet might have very good fingers, so there's nothing wrong about that. And sometimes it was very depressing to go through a whole day and find nothing, and then there were days of rejoicing when the most remarkable talent came to light. For instance, my first flute, Oliver Bannister, who's now been pinched from me by Covent Garden, his first flute, Covent Garden. He was then 16. Came, never played in an orchestra, and one of the great flute players of our time. And we had many remarkable instances. A girl who was a school teacher, proved a splendid horn player, and she's still in the orchestra. And I couldn't find a first horn anywhere till Hilderay Gollance's daughter came along, and she became the first horn. The first trombone I found out at the Hippodrome or something in Manchester. A marvellous player, never heard of symphonies. As you know, the opening last movement of the Brahms, where there's a top A, but and most professional symphony players that tremble about that, to him that was an A like any other A. He played it, you know, for George Robey, so he could play it for Brahms. It didn't make any difference. But one of the funniest instances I remember, a dear old boy who came to the double bass audition. He was a rather attractive chap, and he'd hardly play at all. But we had a good time. So I made one of the test pieces. Is always the scherzo of the Beethoven. Dum diddle 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 rum pum 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 pum. So we had a go at that. He put his hand down, and he left it. He never moved the hand. He moved the bow. Dum 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 dum. He's always playing the same note. So we had a good laugh over that. Then I made him play the solo from Othello, which has that frightful jump from the E flat to the C flat. Da dee da dee, and the distance on the bass is quite all that, you see. So I said, have a go at that. So he went I said, it's further up than that. So he went a bit further. No, I said, it's further than that. And at last, I took hold of the bass, and I played this to him. And he said, up there? Oh, so I'd never been up there before. So they compensated quite a lot of what we had to go through. Well, to cut the long story short, we did find an orchestra. And we opened in Bradford, and it wasn't a few months before the orchestra was being quoted as an example to some of the existing orchestras, because they'd taken this, you know, with tremendous seriousness, and that is what is now known as the legend of the Halley.
Do you find that conditions here nowadays favour the very thorough preparation of perhaps the editing of great musical masterpieces?
Oh, yes, and that's one of the main reasons why I've remained here. You see, an orchestra which has a permanent conductor, and some of you may not realize that I'm only the 4th permanent conductor of the Halley in 107 years of history. 1958, this is 107 years of history. Because an orchestra which has required a style, you see, a conductor can't leave anything behind him like a composer. Almost the only thing he can leave is an orchestra which has a real tradition and the style of playing. Now, you may like that, you may dislike it, but anybody who hears the Halley when I'm conducting knows it's the Halley. And there's very little of that today because of these semi-permanent conditions. And as I think I was telling you, Charles, the other day, you see, they have an enormous repertoire which always needs touching up in certain places, like a quartet that plays together. But it leaves, if I have a great work to prepare, like a big, new, huge Mahler symphony, we always place it at a period when we are playing more or less standard repertory. The orchestra is not let off rehearsal because of the standard repertory. It's called for the same number of rehearsals which are used for this work they're preparing. And it has twofold. It keeps them busy and gives them the incentive of preparing something they've never heard or played before. So see, this really permanent orchestra has tremendous advantages, both musically and morally, I think, because the standards keep creeping up, and that's when you begin to feel dissatisfied.
Barbirolli, JB as they all call him, is booked up with work for the next 2 years at least. In his first series of big engagements as a young conductor, he undertook to handle 3 massive operas in 1 week. He seems to have driven himself at that pace ever since. New York, where he was the principal conductor of the New York Philharmonic Orchestra for over 6 years, and where recently he stormed through a great season with his Houston Orchestra. Rome, where he played Elgar to Pope Pius XII. Barbirolli holds the Order of Knighthood of the Italian Republic and is extremely proud of it. Helsinki, where they ask him to play not Elgar, but their own Sibelius. He's taking the Helsinki City Orchestra on their European tour this year to mark the Sibelius centenary. And Manchester, his home and workshop since 1943. Barbirolli has done an enormous amount to promote the work of composers unknown in England before he introduced their music, and a great deal, too, to disseminate the work of the English composers of this century. He himself suggested that we might end this program with a final section of Elgar's Second Symphony, where he asked to nominate the last notes in his very last concert. He told us that these are what he would choose.